looks like we are live on YouTube, the library's YouTube page as well. Awesome. I like it when things work smoothly like that. So we'll give just a couple more moments for people to find their way in, as I expected. Here comes another person in the waiting room. Good evening, and I'll do some official introductions and get us started here in just a moment. So welcome everybody. I'm glad you were able to join us. If you're joining us here in Zoom, fabulous. If you are joining us on YouTube or Facebook, I have put the link to the Zoom meeting. So I put both the URL that you can follow or the meeting ID, so that if you'd like to join us here in Zoom, you're welcome to. The main difference is it's going to be easier to follow the chat and to communicate with me in Zoom. I will be trying to watch chat on the other platforms as well, but there's me watching all these chats. So it made me, I can't, my eyes are only so much. I'm only operating on one screen today. So I appreciate your patience. There is also usually a delay between Zoom and where we're primarily doing this and the other platforms. So I don't encourage you, I do encourage you to choose one and only one. If you try to watch us on multiple, you get this very funky stereophonic with a delay. It's not what you want. It's not true stereo. It's the opposite. It's like, it's true, it's just noise. You don't want it. So choose one, stay with it. It's 7:02. I'm going to turn on recording and get us started. So good evening, everyone. We still have folks joining us, and I'm sure we will as I do some introductory remarks here, but I want to get us started. I'm so glad you all were able to join us tonight. My name is Clayton Cheever. I'm the Assistant Director at the Thomas Crane Public Library in Quincy, Massachusetts. You may judge by my surroundings. I am not sitting in the library this evening. I am at home, and I hope you all are somewhere safe and comfortable as well. I am really glad that we can continue to provide library services remotely while in these really tumultuous times. I'm just glad you all were able to find your way here. As I've explained a couple times, but I'll repeat for folks and for the recording, we are doing this live on Zoom right now. This recording is being broadcast across YouTube and Facebook right now, a couple different Facebook pages, both for the Thomas Crane Public Library Facebook and for communities responding to extreme weather. And it's also on the Thomas Crane Library's YouTube channel. It will stay in raw form on those channels, but we will also do some post-production and take a nice finalized, polished production of this program and be sharing it on QETV and with the Mass Media Exchange in the future, so that public access channels around the Commonwealth can pick it up and stream it for local communities if they're interested. I suspect because the content we're sharing tonight is going to be of most interest to people on the South Shore, but we can also talk about that. And if there's things that we think would be attractive, or if you know people in other places around the Commonwealth that you think could benefit, I encourage you to talk to me and learn how your local media center can make this available for as many people as possible. I'm really excited about the content tonight. There's a lot of stuff happening at the library. We do have to-go service where if you want to come and borrow any of our materials or let us help you get access to materials in other libraries across the state, we can do that. We have a reservation system so that when your materials come in, we'll let you know, and you can place a request you can make a reservation to come in during a 15-minute block and come and pick up your stuff. We're doing that to keep it safe. We are trying to keep you and everyone in our communities and our staff safe as well. So we're doing that in a contactless way so that you can have access to all the rich resources that are there in physical form. We also have tons available online, and I encourage you to go to our website at thomascranelibrary.org and learn about everything that we have available online. That may be of how you found out about this program that we had this evening, or you may have heard about it from another source. We do have a calendar with a lot happening, so I encourage you to go and check out our calendar and learn what the library is hosting online this week, this month. I will give you a tip if you're a classical music lover and missing live performances. There is a concert that I had the pleasure of recording with Mark, the producer from Quincy Access Television, of the Duo Ami. Duo Ami is a group of, it's two people who play piano and cello, and they did a fabulous concert that we recorded in our Richardson, in our classic oldest part of the library, and we're going to be making it available for you on Thursday evening, the 19th of November at 7 o'clock. That will be on Zoom. We'll actually have the musicians with us here on Zoom to listen and watch it together and have a conversation with them afterwards. And we'll also be broadcast on Facebook, on Zoom, and on QATV at the same time. So little preview of things to come. That's about all you're going to hear from me this evening. I am going to pass it to our esteemed guests I'm so delighted to hear from. And we're going to kick off with Alyssa Hall, who's here with Quincy for Transformative Change. Welcome, everybody. I'm so glad you joined us.
Thanks so much, Clayton. Can you pull up that slide for me, if you wouldn't mind?
I would be glad to. The land acknowledgement slide?
Yes, please.
Yep, you've got it.
So first, before we get started this evening, the organizers of this event have joined together to discuss the city of Quincy, which resides on the ancestral and unceded lands, excuse me one second, of the Massachusetts people, whose name has been appropriated by our Commonwealth. We wish to pay respect to those Massachusetts elders, past and present, as well as elders of the Wampanoag people who have historically resided on these lands. We comprehend that land acknowledgement is a small and very important step towards ensuring a culture of respect, truth, and accountability in our community. And it's imperative that these words develop into action as a sign of demonstrating our respect. So first and foremost, we'd like to acknowledge those people on this land that we sit on. And then second, I would like to discuss a little bit about, to go over some of the groups that are hosting today's talk. There are 4 groups in particular. The first is the Quincy Interfaith Network, and they have promoted and helped us pull together this event, so we thank them very much. Also, similarly, the Quincy Climate Action Network, QCAN, has been instrumental in helping us pull this together and get as many people online as possible. So that's awesome. And then the Fore River Residents Against the Compressor Station, or FRRACS, that's another local group that's co-sponsored our event. So I believe there are a few people on this evening that are a part of that group. And then finally, the group Quincy for Transformative Change, which is what I represent. I am the co-leader of the Environmental Justice Task Force. This is a group that has been pulled together in 2019 in the light of the social unrest that's happened and come to a head in 2020. And so my task force, the Environmental Justice Task Force, we have a mission to bring environmental justice to the community in Quincy and to the larger community in Massachusetts. Environmentalism has long been a cause spearheaded by, quote, white meaning well people. And we acknowledge that has often left Black and Brown people in the worst conditions with no voice to speak on the environment they want to live in. And our task force is working to ensure that residents of Quincy can thrive in a healthy and sustainable environment. So I'm really pleased to have this conversation tonight with the folks that we have on the line, including Dr. Reverend Vernon Walker from Communities Responding to Extreme Weather, or CREW, Dr. Caren Solomon, who's a primary care physician and the deputy director at the New England Journal of Medicine, and then also Dr. Jim Recht, a psychiatrist at the Cambridge Health Alliance. And both Caren and Jim are actually founding members of the Climate Code Blue. So with that very short introduction to our groups, I'd like to go ahead and hand it over to Reverend Walker, and we will get started with the main core of today's talk. So thanks so much, everybody, for being here. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Alyssa, for your kind introduction. Thank you, Clayton, for also opening this up. We thank everyone that is on this particular call tonight. You could have been on any Zoom at this particular time, but you are here with us, so we certainly do appreciate that. In fact, we are elephant happy and hippopotamus glad that you have taken some time out to be with us to discuss this very critical issue of climate resiliency in New England, and particularly Quincy. So again, it just does my heart gladness to see so many folks here, considering the times that we are living in with all the political chaos and the political uncertainty that we find in our world. You know, I think it's power when we come together. And There's power when we come together as we're taking a journey together. But as you know, in a journey has an inception and then an ending point, a beginning and an ending. And so on this journey, we will delve into this PowerPoint that I'm going to share, and we're going to talk about where we are, where we hope to go, and what we're dealing with related to extreme weather, particularly in its impacts on the South Shore, Quincy and the South Shore. And again, thank you to all the community partners that are here on tonight. We certainly do appreciate collaborating, and we certainly hope this is not the last time. Indeed, this may be the first time, but this ain't the last time, because we're certainly going to need more collaboration as extreme weather gets more intense. However, I would like to share with you all, I'm going to share with you all this PowerPoint, and then we're going to walk through it. We're going to walk through it together, and it will help us it will help us delineate. It will help us delineate some of the things that we are facing in our world today related to extreme weather. So let me just pull this up. Give me 1 second, y'all. I am just looking for my PowerPoint.
While you're looking for that, I just sent a note to everybody, and I'll do an audio while you look. Just letting people know that if you do have any questions, you can use the chat feature. We have it so that you can really only chat with me, but I will be your voice. If you'd like, at the end, when we have time for questions to speak, you can raise your hand or let me know through the chat that you'd like to say something, and we can ask you to unmute yourself and pass a mic to you as well. So just wanted a little technical feature. So back to you, Reverend Walker.
Oh, thank you so kindly. Okay, so is everyone seeing my screen? I can't see y'all, but
we can see your screen. Yep.
Okay, I'm just looking for present. Here we go. All right, can people see this? Because I can't see y'all. Okay, yep, I'm assuming.
Yep, we can see you.
Okay, so we're here to talk about climate impacts in Boston, Greater Boston, Quincy, South Shore. So we are the communities responding to extreme weather. We are part of the Better Future projects. We're CREW. So CREW is an acronym for communities responding to extreme weather. And just to read the mission here, we are, as we mentioned, we are a program under the Better Future Project. And the Better Future Project is an organization, nonprofit, that works to build a powerful grassroots movement to address the climate crisis and advance a rapid and responsible transition beyond coal, oil, and gas towards a renewable energy future for all. So there's 350 Mass. Some of you all may have heard of 350 Mass. There's Divest Ed. That is a program that works with students. There's a staff that works with students across the country at various universities to encourage their university to divest pensions from fossil fuel companies. And then there's CREW. CREW is a young grassroots organization that aims to build equitable, inclusive neighborhood climate resilience in New England through hands-on education, service, and planning. That's our website down there. The organization has been around for about almost 2 years. I have had the privilege of serving as the program manager for about almost 2 years, a little over a year and a half. So again, so let me come back here. So when we think of climate resilience, and it will become a lot more clearer as we go through these PowerPoints. We understand that what we mean by when we say extreme weather, we're talking about heat waves, floods, stormwater runoff, hurricanes in some communities, etc. These are an example of what we call extreme weather. And these extreme weather events are connected to climate change because the earth is warming up and global warming is happening, and it is therefore causing all these events to happen. The days are getting hotter and longer. We'll get into that in a second. Sea level is rising. There are more floods happening because of sea level rise. But again, we'll get into that. So we know that there's a need to prepare people for these type of weather events, and you'll see why. So the question is, what impacts of climate change can we expect to see in New England? Well, we have heat here, and you see here, this is a map, right? So the epoch of 1971 to 2000, we only saw about 11 days of temperature over 90 degrees and 1 day over 100. In the time period of which we currently see ourselves, which of course there's a lot of tipping points involved, 2015 to 2044, we see that there is almost more than double the amount of heat waves of extreme heat that we will be experiencing. And then we see the epoch of 2055 to 2084. And also keep in mind, y'all, this is for the whole New England area. Keep in mind that there are only 91 days of extreme heat from June through August. So we're looking at, between 2055 and 2084, we're looking at over 60 days of extreme heat. And we must understand that heat has consequences. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a second. In a minute, I'll stop sharing my screen. So I want you to look at this information here. And understand that there are ramifications for extreme heat wave. In Chicago in 1995, 739 people died because of an extensive heat wave. It was about a week of hot days of extreme heat over 90. And here with us tonight, we have, I'll stop sharing my screen for a second, because here we have tonight, as mentioned, we have Dr. Caren Solomon and Dr. Jim Recht. And I would like to hand it over to, and either one of you can go in whatever order you like. I'd like to hand it over to one of you two. Well, Dr. Caren will deal with the health consequences of extreme heat. Dr. Jim will deal with the mental, who's, as mentioned earlier, psychiatrist, will deal with the mental health consequences that are related to extreme heat. So I'm going to put a pin where I am as we articulated and elucidated that we will clearly see more intensive hot days, as last July, or this July, was the hottest hottest month in human history. So I'm going to put a pin where I am, and I'm going to hand it over to whoever would like to start.
Okay, thank you. So thank you, Vernon and Clayton and Alyssa. And I'm really glad that we're having the opportunity to talk about what this means for people's health, because it's a big deal. So, as you pointed out, it's just getting hotter and hotter. So basically 4 of the past 5 years are among the hottest years on record. And right now, 2020 is slated, it's expected to be the hottest ever. And Vernon, you've obviously touched on that. So there are a number of really serious health consequences that people should be aware of. And one sort of key one is just the direct effects of heat causing either what's called heat cramps or heat exhaustion, or worst case scenario, heat stroke. So all illnesses that people experience just from being in really hot weather and then not being able to adequately cool. So, kind of the least of those, which is just, people are exercising in the heat. You guys may have already experienced it. You can get kind of crampy. And if you just get in a cool place and you drink some water, people are generally okay. Heat exhaustion is sort of more serious, and people can really feel ill. They can get nauseous, they can vomit, but they're sweating and they're kind of cooling themselves. But the really deadly one is heat stroke. And again, I'm sure you've all heard of it. And that's when your body temperature just really rises. So typically it's over 103 degrees. It could go up to 104 or 105. Sometimes people, instead of sweating, are just dry to the touch because they just cannot cool themselves. And people end up becoming profoundly ill. So, people can have changes in their mental status. They can be confused. They can lose consciousness. And in that setting, it's a medical emergency. So, if you see someone or, you're with somebody who is really becoming very ill in the heat, you need to call 911, and you want to be trying to cool people as quickly as possible, getting them into a cold immersive bath or covering them with cold packs. And it's just like incredibly dangerous. And it's the biggest risk for old people. so that we know that about 50% of elderly people who actually find themselves in that situation die from heat stroke. Also kids, because they can't often regulate their temperature as well, are at a higher risk. And then, we know that people, and this applies to Quincy, is we know that cities and places where buildings are kind of denser, they just get hotter. Okay, so there's heat being emitted from the buildings and from the automobiles in the area, and there's often areas where there's just not a lot of green space, so that those areas get hotter and then they stay hotter at night. So there just isn't a chance to really adequately cool. And people are in really just very serious risk in those circumstances. So it's like we want to make sure people have air conditioning, want to make sure that we're checking on our neighbors. So again, this may seem a little distant now because we finally, made ourselves into November, but it's going to happen again next summer. That one of the biggest risk factors for running into serious health problems in extreme heat is not having anybody looking in on you, so that people don't notice when things are kind of heading in a bad direction. So there's a lot of other health consequences I'm actually happy to talk about, but I wonder, let's give Jim a chance here to talk about mental health.
Great, thanks, Caren. Well, I appreciate your touching on mental health aspects of this. In the, one of the last things you mentioned was the importance of social supports and intact social networks. And I believe there's even evidence from just for example, the heat wave that killed so many people in Chicago that Vernon talked about, that one of the correlates for an increase of severe illness or death during that crisis, in addition to what I think we all have to appreciate, race and income level, even independent of those variables, the existence of a solid support network was predictive of better health or better resilience. So as something as simple as having family or friends who will check in on one during these extreme heat waves is really important. So I'll talk just a little bit about, in a bit more detail about some of the specific harms related to very hot days or to increases in average temperature in general. Heat, increased temperatures and increased incidence of very hot days, that type of heat is associated with conflict, interpersonal conflict, social conflict, and violence. And I know that sounds all very heavy. And in fact, there's not a lot of understanding about what the links are. Why, what is it about high heat that that appears to cause or at least increase the chances of day-to-day interpersonal conflict, conflict between drivers during commutes, higher incidence of domestic violence, and also more widespread social conflict, social unrest. There are even studies that point to correlations between the likelihood of civil war and other types of wars breaking out during heat crises or heat waves. But on the kind of local level, personal level, heat tends to cause increases in irritability, worsening of depression and anxiety symptoms. In kids and young adults, there are a number of studies that show relationships between higher ambient temperatures and more frequent very hot days and decreased cognitive function. Another way to say that is sort of increased cognitive impairment or distractibility, other signs of what we often kind of generalize as hyperactivity, attention deficit hyperactivity. And higher temperatures are associated with lower achievement scores for kids and adolescents. In terms of people who already have vulnerabilities to mental illness, heat is a bad thing. And if you struggle with depression or bipolar disorder or many types of anxiety disorders, or if you have got a family member or friend who does, you'll know this already. And why is that? What is it about heat that drives symptom exacerbations? Well, there as well, we're not entirely sure, but one pretty clear link appears to be heat's disruptive effect on sleep, on quality of sleep and sleep patterns. So heat tends to result in fewer hours of sleep at night for an average individual, more disrupted sleep, lower sleep quality. And the links between sleep disruption and the risk for, especially for people with depression, major depression, and other mood disorders like bipolar disorder, the risk for developing a new episode of depression or mania goes way up once sleep is disrupted. So I kind of touched on some of the general effects on interpersonal irritability, conflict, even potentially violence, and then also some more specific effects on mood and anxiety problems.
Yeah, and not to drag us all down further, but it is important to mention that sort of beyond those kind of immediate effects, the sort of heat illness and the mental health effects that Jim has talked about. There are actually lots of studies showing associations of extreme heat with problems in multiple organ systems. So that there's more kidney failure in extreme heat. You mentioned sort of cognitive and psychiatric effects, but there's higher risks of stroke and of heart attacks in extreme heat. For pregnant women exposed to extreme heat, there are higher risks of adverse pregnancy outcomes like preterm birth. So, there's just, and oftentimes actually these things don't get directly, people don't realize that that's what's going on. So, for example, in the heat wave that Vernon and Jim were, referring to, that was back in 1995 in Chicago. I mean, so lots of people died of heart attacks, and those heart attacks were, you could show that there were many, many, many more, at the time of the heat wave. But I think sometimes it's not fully appreciated. So that if you look, just many causes of death go up when there are periods of extreme heat. And so that's a real worry in terms of where our climate is heading, and us thinking about what we can do to kind of minimize that rise in temperature that's occurring over time.
Thank you so much for that multi-dimensional breakdown of what extreme heat does and how it can impact the human body holistically. We also like to go in, so I'm going to go back. We also like to go back into the PowerPoint and talk about what's another extreme weather event that manifests itself in the South End that is really relevant, as well as heat wave is floods. So we will open this back up, y'all. And I got a video I'm going to show y'all. But before we get there, I want to get to more rain and snow. So this 55% here, that represents and the top 1% of storms, then the top 1% of storms, of the strongest storms in New England from 1958 to 2016, the rain increased by 55%. So we see that rain is more, precipitation is coming, is happening. We are feeling because of extreme weather. So we must realize is that when rain happens, we see two major consequences of rain and how it affects an area, particularly an area like Quincy. We see flooding and we see stormwater runoff. But let us delve into flooding if we can. flooding is, and this is stormwater flooding. So this is one level of flooding. So I took an example of Cambridge. And then I'm going to show y'all a video of a segment of a news news clip that talks about flooding in Quincy that will make it real. But I want to start and I want to juxtapose Cambridge and I want to juxtapose Cambridge, Boston, and then Quincy. So we see here, this purple stuff is the purple color here is stormwater runoff. So we see that there is a lot of storm there that, you know, areas like Kendall, MIT, the Central will be flooded. I myself live in Cambridge. So we see that there is a massive amount of the community that will experience flooding because of stormwater runoff. And then we have coastal flooding and sea level rise. So I'm gonna deal with Boston for a second, and then I'm gonna come bowling down Quincy Valley via this news clip. But I just wanna show y'all, just to give you a bigger picture of the area. So this blue stuff, the light blue stuff is water. So we see by 2030, you know, we see some areas, this is around Boston Commons, we see some areas that are experiencing flooding, right? We go by 2050, we see more areas experiencing flooding and floods. And then we go by 2070, and we see whole communities are flooded and underwater. And this is related to coastal flooding and sea level rise. And what we must realize is that a lot of Boston is on landfill, so Back Bay, Seaport District, parts of Dorchester. You know, some of these parts, unfortunately, if in the worst case scenario, will be underwater. But there is still a level of flooding that will happen because of the more increased precipitation that our area is experiencing. I'm not going to deal too much with hurricanes. I'm going to skip that. But before we go further, I want to come. Seem like we lost Dr. Recht here. I want to show y'all a video. I want to show y'all this video of a flooding in Quincy.
People here on the South Shore, they're also breaking power out on a coastal town.
Can we all see and hear this?
Yep.
Okay, great. I will play this.
Towns bracing for potential flooding and power outages from tomorrow's storm.
Officials are telling people to be prepared. Anna Myler's live in Scituate with what you need to know today. Anna?
And Kate, it's not just the blizzard-like conditions that will impact people here on the South Shore. They're also bracing for flooding and potential power outages. And officials are stressing that today is the day to get ready. This storm follows a stretch of sub-zero temperatures that turn South Shore beaches into blocks of ice. The harbor by Fore River Bridge is already clogged with ice, and now snow and high winds are on the way. In Weymouth and Quincy, winter storm watch signs are in place, warning residents to prepare. And in Marshfield, there's a concern for coastal flooding and worry about inadequate sections of seawall.
We've got an astronomically high tide, and with the storm surge of 1.5 to 2 feet, we're expected to have some moderate flooding in the Brant Rock area and some other parts of town that normally flood, which means we'd have to shut down the roadways.
We've had storms here that the water comes rushing down the road, even though it's blocked up there. It looks like a raging river. And that's scary.
The town of Scituate is warning residents to secure your property, have an evacuation plan, make sure generators are working and that you're stocked up on fuel, have enough food and water to last at least 3 days, and make sure to refill your prescriptions. Shelters will be open if needed. The main shelter here in Scituate is the high school. Reporting live in Scituate, Anna Myler, WBZ This Morning.
Okay, so we are back. Oh, y'all don't hear? Oh, do y'all hear that?
You do have a little bit of an echo, it sounds like, but.
Okay. No, I had another video playing. One of the stream weather. So we see that is real. So I'm going to turn this over. I don't know if Jim is back, but I'm going to turn this over to Caren to perhaps deal with the physical consequences of flooding and water runoff, and then perhaps Jim can deal with the mental.
Absolutely. So this is another real health risk. So what we know when there are big storms and floods is that you can actually end up overrunning essentially like water treatment plants or sewage treatment plants, and you can end up having contaminated water, and also the water that gets into people's homes and is flooding the streets. And we saw in that little news clip about the streets just really looking like a river. That water is often contaminated. You have to consider it to be contaminated water, so that there are lots of infections that become increased risk. And typically that, I'm thinking more, particularly in the warm weather, when we've thought of some of these hurricanes that have gone through the southern, United States and Puerto Rico and such, that a number of different kinds of infection can occur with these. So things like cryptosporidiosis, which gives people diarrhea, or Legionella, which you guys will be familiar with from Legionnaire's disease, hepatitis A. Those things can basically be risks to people just from being exposed to floodwater. And so generally people have to be super careful if they're kind of going to be walking through floodwater. The idea is that people be in big rubber boots and have gloves and stuff to really protect themselves. So one issue is kind of drinking water that's contaminated. Another is if that water is touching your skin, if you have, say, an abrasion. And there have actually been cases where people have gotten horrific skin infections from contaminated water. So that's sort of one big issue. Another thing is, again, in the warm weather, when there are these big storms, you guys know this, but standing water basically attracts mosquitoes. So, we're somewhat fortunate here in that the number of mosquito-borne illnesses that we see are, less than in some tropical areas, but still there have been cases of lots of cases of West Nile virus, for example, after, flooding and standing water. So that's another issue. When water gets into people's homes, as you guys know, mold grows very quickly. And that poses a whole nother set of risks. Pulmonary, lung effects. People can have allergies with that. And then actually, as came out kind of in that, again, in the broadcast that we just saw, is that if roads are blocked off and, people can't get to places, obviously the issue is, well, how do you access medical care? How do you go pick up your medicines if you didn't have your supply of prescriptions in advance? What if you need, you have something to help you with your respiration at home that requires electricity and your power is out. So there's that whole host of, like, you just don't have the normal access to the care and the resources that you would normally have. And again, fortunately here, those things, are generally addressed quickly, and that's good, but it may not be quickly enough for people with certain health needs. We know that when there was Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico, that a lot of people died for not being able to get to a hospital. They couldn't get 911 to come, et cetera. So those are real risks as we have these terrible storms. So those are some key ones. Actually, and the other one, which I think, again, everybody knows, but if there's flooding and there are live wires, obviously there's also an electrocution risk. So another kind of very rare but possible problem. But on to you, Jim.
Sure. So floods, extreme weather, and floods is one example of extreme weather, tend to cause mental health problems in a way indirectly by virtue of the trauma that people suffer during the acute part of the storm or flood. The trauma itself tends to increase one's risk for developing post-traumatic stress disorder and other trauma-related conditions, and increases the severity of already existing anxiety disorders. For kids and young adults, this risk is particularly high, and there are a number of studies that show direct links between, in the aftermath of severe storms. Examples include Katrina, more recently Maria, where the effects include severe negative impacts on the mental health of children. And that probably has, at least in part, to do with the acute fear and the experience of disruption in sort of trusted networks when people are displaced from their homes, when utilities go out and electricity goes out and the lights go out. When kids have the experience of losing their their sense of safety, that tends to have lasting negative effects. And those mental health harms tend to layer themselves on one another and tend to lead to developmental problems that make their lives worse through adolescence and adulthood. Obviously the same is true for adults suffering from the dislocation, potential loss of jobs that in the immediate aftermath of floods. But for kids, the effects can be particularly profound. That includes even temporary interruptions with school, with social activities, sports, and other after-school activities. Those types of losses can have lasting effects on kids and young adults. So in general, severe extreme weather events, particularly floods as an excellent example, they affect their harms via trauma, via the acute trauma and the loss of the sense of safety. And in kids, those problems tend to be most profound.
And Vernon, I assume that you're getting into this, but I feel like as we're talking about all these sort of, pretty worrisome effects, I think
pretty daunting stuff.
Yeah, exactly. It's still really important to point out that a lot of these projections, like what you showed in terms of what's expected for extreme heat, or what's predicted in terms of increasing precipitation, that we really do have the ability, if we make dramatic changes, to have. These are still going to be problems. They're not going to go away, but sort of the degree to which they're going to increase, we could make a very big impact on keeping that lower. By virtue of moving off of fossil fuels. And
that's right.
So, I think rather than just feel terrible about it. And the other thing is, obviously, we can build our resilience. And I know that's what you guys are all about, kind of being prepared for these.
That's right. Why are doctors like us into this kind of thing? It's not because we enjoy spreading doom and gloom around. It's because we know that we have solutions for these problems. It's really true. And we can reduce these risks, and we can improve our health as we do it.
And that is so true. And I want to talk about another psychological impact, and then we want to share about what Crew does with all this, and then we want to open it up for Q&A for our folks that are on the call. So I'm going to share again. So I am at this slide here. So Dr. Jim mentioned something about, so he mentioned a lot of information about the psychological impact. I do want to share a study about Hurricane Katrina. We see up to 54% of adults and 45% of children suffer depression after a natural disaster. And 49% of Hurricane Katrina survivors develop an anxiety or mood disorder, and 1 in 6 develop PTSD. Suicide and suicidal ideation more than doubled. Outside of the United States, suicides of 60,000 Indian farmers over the past 3 decades have been directly linked to climate change. An increase of 5 degrees Celsius, 9 degrees Fahrenheit on any given day was linked to 335 deaths. I want to just share with this and share this a little bit. Dr. Jim, if you want to weigh in on this, please feel free. But I want to talk about the crumbling community effect. You know, after a climate event resulting in displacement, people may experience a diminished sense of self, difficulty relating to others, diminished social interactions, nostalgia, the loss of sense of place, solace, and security tied to one's physical environment. The community impacts includes domestic violence, child abuse and violence, e.g., assaults and civil conflict, economic insecurity, physical damage, or other potential effects. So before we go into what CREW does about all this, I wanted to just stop because we have a mental health clinician on the call. I wanted to stop to see if you had any additional insight on that, or if you wanted to provide another perspective on that.
Sure. Well, I just want to amplify and confirm what you've just presented, Vernon. And for me, the two most important messages there are, number one, we can work together as members of a common community. We can develop our community's resilience. We develop our resilience individually, within our family, and in our community. And I think one reason Caren and I are such big fans of CREW is that's the work that you're helping us learn how to do. The second really powerful message, I believe, is we don't need to accept a world where increasing numbers of very hot days is a done deal, or where repeated floods are a done deal. We don't need to let things play out that way. You know, that's why we are involved in climate action. That's why we're doing what we can to educate the community, our communities, about how, if we radically reduce carbon in the atmosphere now, we're going to have a healthier future. And the technologies that we have for reducing carbon are technologies that make us healthier right away. That, you know, the co-benefits of reducing pollution and carbon in the atmosphere include better physical health, better physical well-being right away. So first, we can make our community stronger. That's what we're here for. And second, we can do a lot to improve the future.
And that is so true. And you know, you and Dr. Caren have pointed out about what CREW does, and we will just get into it here. So what does CREW do about all this? So as again, we're not here to just spread gloom, doom, and destruction, but there's something that people can do proactively. While we may not can shut down every fossil fuel company in the world, at least in the next week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, etc.
It's going to take at least 6 weeks.
Yes, 6 weeks. Yes. Until the maniac out in the White House is out of, until the maniac receives his eviction notice at the end of January and is out the White House. But just so you know, CREW is not political. That was just a side joke. We ain't political. We like to work with Democrats, Republicans, and independents. So CREW is not political. We're nonpartisan. So the reality of it is, what do we do about all this? Well, I'm really so glad you asked. What we do is we encourage CREW teams to develop. And what a CREW team is a network of volunteers who come together in their community. And they are interested in building the social fabric in their community. They are interested in connecting with neighbors in their community. They are interested in getting to know their neighbors. Currently, we have a Somerville and Cambridge team. We have a team potentially starting up in Worcester. We have a team potentially starting up in Dorchester. And we would love to connect with groups here in Quincy and start a team. It's not labor intensive. I have a how-to document of how to start a crew team. We can put people in touch with our existing crew team to understand best practices. Because what we recognize and realize is that because the number was so high in Chicago of many people that died, 739 in 1995, it would have been a lot more if folks, didn't have a social network to tap into. As Caren said earlier, it's helpful during these extreme weather events, and it increases the risk of survivability when you have someone who has your back, who has your interest, your best interest in mind, and someone who's checking in on you. Eric Klingenberg is the author of the social autopsy of a book called The Social Autopsy of the 1995 Chicago Heat Wave. Check it out, y'all. Basically, he substantiates these claims. He's, from his research, he goes block by block. And if you don't know Chicago, Chicago's a beautiful city. It's like 4 or 5 times bigger than Boston. It's beautiful. And there's a lot of different neighborhoods there, and a lot of bigger neighborhoods in terms of the population there is a lot bigger than the population is in Boston. At the last US consensus count 10 years ago, Chicago had about 2.5 million, where Boston had 620,000 folks. But what we understand is that when there's a social fabric in a community and people are connecting with each other, now we understand we live in a pandemic. So our teams are not meeting in person, they're using Zoom. I think it will be critical to start to work with some of the folks from these organizations here, from the many different organizations here, to work and to maybe build a team collectively. We could work with someone from FRRACS, we could work from someone from QCAN, we could work with someone from other organizations I haven't mentioned that are not coming to me right now. And perhaps we could put a team together. And really this team can be, it can be as big as it can, as we want it to be. But really a small team of thought leaders who represent the different organizations that are on this call. And we come together and we talk about how we can build social resiliency. I want to point out what you see on the screen is, this is a depaving event where my mouse is moving around. And these are folks in Somerville who are like depaving is breaking up concrete. Now, I'm not advocating that you go in the middle of your street and bring out a sledgehammer and start breaking up the concrete in the middle of your street and talk about you're doing it in the name of green space and love and peace and harmony. Now, you might go to jail and, that might be a problematic thing for you. So we don't want that to be an unnecessary problematic thing for you. So we don't advocate just going up to random streets and going up to random pieces of concrete and just breaking it up for the hell of it to create more green space in the name of love, peace, and harmony. No, we have these depaving events, and we have a team. We have a team of folks in Somerville that are experts in this. When we go at people's private properties or we talk with folks and they say, well, they might want their driveway depaved or what have you. So we have hard hats and helmets and sledgehammers. And because if there's more green space, then it will suck carbon out of the air. So that's how it's beneficial for the community. Even if, obviously we don't tell private landowners what to do with their land, but normally there's some type of commitment to not putting new pavement there, some type of commitment to either creating green space or bricks or some other type of thing that was better for the environment. We have climate resiliency hubs. We have a robust program. We have about 26 nationally. We have about 18 in Massachusetts, 1 in Canada. And climate resiliency hubs are organizations that have a physical space, and they want to open their doors to residents in their community during an extreme weather event. For an example, we have a lot of libraries, we have faith communities, and when there's a heat wave, obviously during a pandemic, it's hard to do this, but in non-pandemic times, I don't think we'll be in a pandemic forever and forever and forever. You know, open up the space to let people come in and cool off. Normally libraries do that anyway. We also have a relationship with faith communities related to that. And you know, we provide information on preparedness information, not necessarily emergency, but climate preparedness. And the requirement that we ask organizations. So if you know some of the South Shore of an organization that serves a social purpose or that serves to meet a social need, the commitment is just hosting a yearly event. It could be during what we call Climate Preparedness Week, which is the September 24th to September 30th. Last year we had 130 events. This year all our events were virtual. We had over, I think, 50 events this year. And the purpose of the events, you know, examples of events were like book readings and, you know, guest speakers. And so libraries and people who signed up to host events, they, you know, hosted, you know, they have latitude to host their own kind of event. So yeah, so we have that on our website. So we'll put our website in the chat so you can see more about Climate Preparedness Week. And you can see the videos this year from Climate Prep Week 2020. And our theme was Racial Justice is Climate Justice. So you can see all the events there. And I'll put that link in the chat shortly. We also, you know, at our resiliency hubs, we also send, for some of them, and those that requested, an emergency preparedness kit so people can know how to make it themselves. So we send a book bag and it has some of these items in it, not for anybody to take, but, you know, just to show a live demonstration of what it is. So I'm going to stop right there. So that is a little bit about crew. I want to, before we open it up, we'll see if any additional thoughts by our folks here. But before you chime in, that's what we are at Crew. Again, I'll put it in the chat. I'll put the, so you can read more about us. And you can see Climate Prep Week 2020 and all the, you know, extraordinary events. So we hosted 6 of them, 6 central events. We even hosted an event with Eric Klingenberger, whose book we mentioned earlier. But I wanted to just hand it off to Caren and Jim to see if there's any additional thoughts before we open up the Q&A. If there's no additional thoughts, then we could just open it straight for Q&A.
I have a quick additional thought.
Oh, sure.
So yeah, no, so one thing I was going to add, because you pointed out a really important issue with COVID and sort of one of those emergency measures of having sort of central places that people can go and, you know, be safe. And I do want to say that obviously COVID means that we have to be extra careful about how we handle those spaces. But I think it is really important to emphasize that, you know, if somebody's in an extreme heat situation and they don't have any air conditioning, you know, they're going to be much better off if the temperature is climbing in their home to go to a safe space where there is cooling available with, you know, appropriate masking and distancing. And in order, obviously, for people to be distanced, it means that more places have to be opened for cooling than might have had to be when you could kind of cram more people in a smaller space. But it's a really important point with respect to things like hurricanes, because there's a whole discussion in this hurricane season. And again, we're at some risk. We're obviously at lesser risk than the South, but where people don't want to leave their homes, and people don't like to leave their homes anyway. And then with COVID, obviously there's a real disincentive to bring yourself to a shelter. But the fact is that to live right in the path of a hurricane, you know, and be staying in your home is much more dangerous than going to a central place that's being appropriately and safely run. So I did want to say that, you know, COVID makes it more difficult, but doesn't make it impossible for us to still have those safe spaces.
And additionally, and then we can open up for Q&A unless there's some additional thoughts. Caren mentioned earlier about vectors and mosquitoes. So as a result of the world warming up, we're going to see vectors migrate to the Western Hemisphere, mosquitoes that carry malaria. And I've seen those mosquitoes. They look scary. I spent a little time in India several years ago. And before I went to India, I got a malaria shot. But, they're scary. So, we're going to start to see these vectors and these insects that are, tick-borne illnesses. They're going to start to move to the Western Hemisphere. And they will start to affect folks. So that's another, relationship of how extreme weather is connected to public health. So do we want to open it? Do I turn this back over to Alyssa? Do you want to moderate Q&A?
I'd be happy to do it, but I believe Clayton's been getting all of the questions together. So I think he's the more appropriate deliverer of the questions, I think.
Okay. Yes, Clayton.
So we do have a couple of questions that have come through. I was actually going to ask Alyssa, as our esteemed guest and representing the other groups that are co-sponsoring tonight, if you had any questions and kind of give you an opportunity, if you had any thoughts or anything that you wanted to share even before we moved into the Q&A period.
Yeah, thanks. I definitely do. I think after talks like this, there tends to be a sense of dread and of sadness and frustration. And I think one of the things that helps with those feelings is driving ourselves into a project or a group or something that that will help us feel like we have an active engagement in fixing this problem. And so I'd like to offer, I'm going to go ahead and put my email address in the chat as well, so that if anybody is interested in the Quincy area, and I know someone already got in touch with me, in getting involved with Quincy for Transformative Change. We are a purely volunteer group. I do this outside of my normal job. To volunteer with us, and we have a lot of the awesome volunteers are on the line as well. We've got some really exciting environmental justice programs like Adopt a Block and Adopt an Island. So we're creating community spaces, community gardens, and trying to help the city consider policies that are going to help us be more resilient to things like heat impacts and storm surge. And so I'd be happy to have anybody on the call here in our group. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that we have and get you all connected with maybe some resources if Quincy for Transformative Change isn't the most appropriate. So I'm going to go ahead and do that while we're doing the Q&A, and please do reach out.
Great. Thank you, Alyssa. You guys are doing some great work, and I'm so fortunate to have so many concerned and dedicated people passionately working in our community. We do have a few questions here. So I think I will kick them off and encourage people, if you have additional questions, you can put them in the chat to me. Also, I am watching Facebook and YouTube. So if you want to put chats, if you're watching us there, please feel free to put your chats, and I'll try to catch those as well. So the first question came rather early in the evening when we were talking about the effects of extreme heat, and wondering if there are any lessons that we can take from countries, that just exist in hotter climates. Are there higher rates of some of these disorders that were talked about in these warmer countries that are more equatorial, or how do people there mitigate that? And we actually, I'll put a little plug. You can go and watch the video. One of the videos that Vernon was talking about was a program that we did with QCAN, where we actually had an engineer talk about some physical engineering pieces. So people who want to really in-depth that, I would encourage you to go and look at that video and look about some of the energy choices and ways that people have figured out how to make some energy choices just for their own surroundings. But there's a lot more, and I'm really interested in what people here and tonight have to share on this topic.
Sure. So one thing I would say is it's certainly true that places that are sort of naturally much hotter, people are used to living there. And, I think people keep well hydrated, kind of understanding, and this applies to all of us, that obviously at the very hottest times of day is not when you want to be out doing, physical labor in the sun, et cetera. The tricky thing obviously is all those naturally hot places are also getting hotter. So I'm sure, you guys read these, you'll see like 130-degree day in places, in the world that obviously that's beyond what people can be outside and survive in. But I think the kind of some really just kind of basic things to remember, for next summer or whatever, is that, if it's extremely hot, you don't want to be outside in the sun, that you want to hydrate, that you want to be aware if you're overheating. An important thing that I actually neglected to bring up earlier, and I want to mention, one of those systems in our body that's badly affected by heat is our breathing. Okay, so people with underlying breathing problems, and particularly, we didn't talk that much about air pollution. I know Vernon touched on it a little bit, but obviously, again, another thing that is affecting vulnerable populations, and particularly, populations of color and people who are poor, more is being in areas that are very polluted. And we know that heat makes those bad effects of pollution worse. It increases levels of ground level ozone, which is one of the things that can really make it hard for people to breathe and cause problems, people having asthma flares or problems with chronic lung disease. And so, particularly people who are at risk for greater problems need to be that much more careful. And then one other just tip in terms of what to do. We also know there's certain medicines that, and Jim could talk about some that are psych meds. We know that patients who take, say, water pills or certain medicines for blood pressure can be much less able to handle heat and can be more likely to become very ill. So I think people kind of going over those things with their doctor, if they're on medications, knowing if that's a concern, then they can kind of take extra precautions in those situations.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Thanks, Caren, for reminding us of that. It's true for some medications used for treatment of depression, for more severe illnesses like manic depression and schizophrenia. So I won't go into detail now about which specific agents those are, but I completely agree. It's a good idea not to not to freak out about it, not to panic, but to be aware that it's in one's best interest to talk with our doctors ahead of time about which, are there medications that I'm taking that could make me more sensitive to heat, and what can I do about that to prevent those, to reduce those risks.
Thank you. So the next question is on a kind of a very personal level. And Vernon, you talked about this a little bit at the end with the idea of the emergency preparation kit. And I think people would like some more information about what kind of steps they can take, just personally. And we talked about the need to strengthen community and look in on each other. And I definitely want us to emphasize that. But there's some other things, some examples that people have brought up where the idea of a family plan of a safe location to meet. If you're not in the same place when a flood hits, how do you make sure that you can reunite after a really, traumatic or extreme event? Having a ready grab and go bag, some kind of backpack or small suitcase that has, some equipment and some suggestions for that were raised, and maybe you have some other ideas where emergency radios, cell phones with chargers, lighting devices, supplies, meds, essential contact information, phone numbers, and things like that. Before I continue, the same person had a couple other thoughts, but I wonder if you have any reactions to that and just the steps that we can each take, kind of like in the wintertime where we make sure there's a blanket and some water in our car, although if the water's frozen, it's not going to help so much.
Yes, I think people have the ability to customize it. I think what would be a good model is the Red Cross's emergency kit bag, or the Red Cross has I think they may have it on their website. Yeah, you could customize it to your own needs. You certainly want to have a waterproof Ziploc bag, so you can protect your vital documents. And ultimately, what we're thinking about with flooding is, in the worst case scenario, let's say you get flooded in your house, and it might be a few hours before the rescue squad, before the firefighters get to you. So you want to have this bag ready to go to be able to sustain you. Maybe a battery pack, a battery operated charger, so you could charge your phone. But you could customize it to the way in which is suitable for you. I know the Boston Public Health Commission, or I believe the Boston Public Health Commission may have a sample bag online. You certainly want to have, if you're on medication, you definitely want to have a waterproof bag for your medication. And it would be good to have it, ready to go in a place that's accessible, because if a flood is happening, and we know that floods happen often in Quincy. In fact, I want to read this. Residents trapped, rescued from Quincy flood. I'll put this story, this was from 2018. I'll put this story in the chat. I'll put the link. And in the story, it talks about a few folks who were trapped in their house. And I'm reading from the story. Quincy police say they have responded to multiple reports of people in need of rescue and cars stuck on water-filled roads. One family had to be rescued via a front-end loader, according to several reports. So I'll put this story in the chat. But so we do know that getting trapped in the house in a flood is plausible in the South Shore, particularly Quincy. An emergency preparedness kit would definitely be helpful. And I'm going to put the story. I'm going to put the story in the chat.
Great, thanks. Sensing that we've everybody's said what they'd like to say on that. A couple other things that people have suggested is reiterating what was, I think they said it actually before it was said here. I can't remember, Caren or Jim, which of you who said it, but was to pay close attention to weather alerts and evacuate earlier rather than later, and that writing out is never a good survival strategy. Caren, it was you who talked about how much more dangerous it is to try to sit through a storm than to seek shelter. Yeah, people appreciated that. A couple other questions or just kind of comments were raised about, we've talked about mosquito-borne illnesses. A couple other hazards that are really real here are the increase in Lyme disease. And there's clear connections between that, I know, and climate change and extreme weather. Or probably just rising temperatures. We keep seeing the ticks that are carrying the Lyme disease are moving further and further north.
Yeah, I was going to say there's a couple. So it's partly the rising temperatures, and then it's the changing precipitation patterns, and then there's also just land use issues where we're kind of pushing into other areas. But you're absolutely right. So like Lyme is now everywhere in the U.S., which that was just not the case years ago. And then Vernon, you kind of referred to this with worrying about something like malaria, but like we're already seeing, cases of dengue or chikungunya, which were never seen here, down in Florida. So that idea that these diseases are kind of spreading in where they're going, but also how long the season is when they're kind of most active. So, now you see like Lyme disease in weather that you would have thought you wouldn't see Lyme disease in. So absolutely.
And there's also, there's around here, we've seen the emerald, there's an emerald beetle that I know has been killing a lot of trees. I know out west, there's other beetles that have killed a whole lot of trees, and that combined with extreme heat and drought, because there is that, we experienced a drought here this summer when it was so hot. So we have both more rain and more dry spells. And those dry spells combined with these beetles that are killing so many trees make fire conditions horrific. And we're seeing that we haven't seen the fires as much here in the South Shore and on the East Coast, but we certainly don't have to look very far up to Colorado and the fires and the Rockies and the fires that are devastating California for the worse than ever before on record. Yeah. So definitely a lot of connections there too. There's been a shout out to a previous program, Vernon, that was during Climate Prep Week, where Haja Logan, they had a great presentation on looking at urban communities and heat mapping. And I don't know if you want to say anything to remind folks to date and encourage them to go back and look at it. That was recorded and is one of the things people can go and see. But that's another impact when we look at climate exchange and heat in urban communities, that their urban communities are heat sinks. And because of the lack of shade and the prevalence of concrete, not only is there less biomatter to absorb carbon and mitigate climate change, but it actually, just the asphalt and concrete it causes temperatures in urban areas to be higher than surrounding areas immediately. So Is there anything else? I don't know if you'd like to say anything about that.
I think you said it all. I don't have anything to add. It's on our website,
Okay.
And I put the link to the Climate Prep Week page in the chat, and you can go and see those videos.
Great.
Mm-hmm.
So someone wrote in that when they joined QCAN, they began to switch what they thought was 100% renewable that would have been accused of using carbon-based energy. It was a Canadian company, and they switched to a Massachusetts and Rhode Island company that's now working on the green municipal aggregation in Quincy and is working with QCAN. I don't know if anybody has more information about that, or there's been a lot of energy choices. And I know I've, personally seen, been propositioned by a whole bunch of companies that want me to switch over to green energy. And I'm always dubious of something that I just get put in my door. Is this really green, or is this somebody just trying to take advantage of, my concern in wanting a greener planet and greener energy? But is it really green? Or are they just greenwashing? Does anybody have any information about those sources? Maybe that's a topic for a future meeting, and we need to bring some other experts in. We don't have to have all the answers tonight for sure.
It would be really great if the city of Quincy could have some designated programs that they have already approved, so that communities, or that folks in this community could go to the city as a resource for climate, for energy efficiency. I don't think that they currently have anything like that, but that's something that our task force could definitely look into, to providing them some options.
Yeah, we have talked about that also with some of the folks at the Codman Square Neighborhood Development Corporation. And I believe there was mention that the city of Boston is actually in the process of implementing community choice aggregation. This is my, amateur's understanding of this situation, but I believe that once a city has implemented community choice aggregation, then the simple and best bet is choose what the city is offering, because that is going to be the greenest and best deal. But I guess the problem right now is in Quincy. Well, I get one question I would have is, if once Boston implements community choice aggregation, will Quincy have access to that, or is Quincy's utility system separate from the city of Boston's? If it's separate, then the problem.
I don't believe. I mean, we're not technically part of the city of Boston. I think because of even the physical barrier of the Neponset River, connecting us from Dorchester and South Boston, that we're not technically part of their grid, but I don't think it would be that difficult to duplicate some of that effort.
Well, it means political action at your local level. It means, it could be a city council act working with the Department of Utilities or whatever the equivalent is in city of Quincy, pushing them to implement some form of community choice, right?
There's been somebody who's chimed in and actually name dropped Larry Christian, Cretien, with Consumers Green Energy Alliance as a good source for people who are looking for whether a green energy company is actually reliably so. And also the same person was saying that we, confirm we are separate from Boston, that the green municipal aggregation is currently being implemented. So,
Looks like one of the participants has a question. I see a hand.
Yes, I do see a hand. Faye, I see you there, and I've got just one more question in front of you. Unless you wanted to add right to this, you wave your hand if you want to say something right now, but we'll get to you in just a second, I promise. So the next question was saying that with COVID, faith communities have had even more challenges to staying connected and growing leadership. This is obviously somebody from a faith community. And they are wondering how an engagement with crew can revitalize faith communities in Quincy, build relationships among people, develop leadership, as well as meet the goal of extreme weather preparedness. Are there examples of meeting the needs of preparedness and growing leadership and connection via crew? So talk to us a little bit more about the connections that have happened, Vernon.
Yes. We currently have a resiliency hub in the South End in Boston, St. Stephen's Episcopal Church, and they already have run a well-oiled, well, they already, not well-oiled, but they already have a robust youth engagement program. And we are developing more capacities, and we are developing more relationship with faith communities. We have one in Somerville that we're waiting for them to sign the last document, which we call the MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, and then they're ready to jump on board. But we believe that with some of the tools that we have, we can help revitalize, faith community. Because if you haven't seen your parishioners in a while, or your fellow faith community members, inviting them out or inviting them to an extreme weather presentation to talk about weather. And they might think they're getting the weatherman, but they're getting me. I'm not the weatherman. I'm not the meteorologist, but I'm just here to talk. But I will talk about weather, but I'm not the meteorologist. We have seen this model of crew team work with our Somerville team. Somerville and Cambridge teams have combined, and we have seen it work where it fostered relationships among people who didn't know each other, but now they're starting to get to know each other. And also, we have another church that we're working with in Somerville, waiting for them to take the final step. But before the pandemic, we were meeting there, and the pastor is all on board with. It's a United Methodist Church, is all on board with what we do at Crew. So in some instances, we even held climate socials like during last year, and sometime earlier this year as well. The Crew team and Somerville Cambridge have held climate socials where they invited the community to come in and get to know each other. They had a climate social at an Ethiopian restaurant in Somerville. So we've seen some of the Crew teams. We've seen, at least from our very first team, Somerville, which then merged into Somerville Cambridge, we've seen some success, and we're looking to continue to replicate that in other communities.
That sounds great, and I'm sure there's some awesome friendships and connections that are being made with that work. So I'm so excited. There's nothing like solidarity built while welding a sledgehammer with your friends. It's fabulous. There was a quick question about, there's a reference to the American Red Cross site. I think, Vernon, you were talking about some websites, but maybe I got mistaken. But there was another website that was referenced after that, and somebody didn't catch what that second website was. Does anybody remember what that is who can help the person who was just trying to go and visit the second one?
The Boston Public Health Commission.
Thank you. So then, Faye, I'm going to try to summarize, or would you like me to just unmute your mic? You can wave and I'll unmute your mic if you'd like. Here, I'll ask you to unmute, but I'm happy to summarize the question you gave me if you'd like. It looks like, Faye, if you're having a hard time with the mic, I will go ahead and read the question. You should have the ability to unmute right now. But what I have here is talking about the impacts and COVID makes, go ahead. Now you're unmuted. Go ahead, Faye.
Yeah, I wanted to answer the question about the aggregation. The QCAN advocated for the green aggregation, and the City Council has already, agreed to that. We're going to have it hopefully in January of 2021. And in Quincy, and that will be a huge thing. That would be wonderful.
That's huge.
Yeah. And the other thing is, we've been working all along with the city, and we've done a lot of things. We've done Solarize Quincy, where we help people to get solar panels. 113 households got solar panels on their roofs. There are solar panels on a lot of the roofs of the schools in Quincy. We've done a lot of things for the last what is it, 8 years, I guess, that we've been working for energy efficiency and for these other programs of, to cut emissions. So I just wanted to tell people that, because it didn't sound like people were aware of that.
Some other folks have been using the chat to let us know, to let me know about it as well, but you did say it very clearly there. Thank you. Faye, do you want to ask your question too about, you were asking about advocating for a national or state safety net to help people who are being adversely impacted?
Well, I think these times, talks like this about climate change impacts, and also COVID is brought to the surface. A lot of things that are wrong, that are unequal, and that just don't exist. And I think we found out that our safety net is threadbare in a lot of areas. Like I just found out last week, for example, you're talking about mental health as part of this. I just found out last week that Massachusetts is the only state in the country that jails people for substance abuse. And I assume that's because they don't have the facilities to, they haven't built the facilities to, to take care of them otherwise,
Yeah, that's one reason why. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think I think it would be wonderful as part of this to be advocating for, state, for broader kind of things, a better safety, a social safety net, because we certainly need it at this time more than we ever have.
Absolutely.
So that's all. That was my.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would just sort of add to that I think it is just what many of us, and I think you all probably been thinking as well, I think COVID and how badly it was handled and how ill-equipped a lot of places were to appropriately handle it, it was sort of like a model for, what we're seeing with climate change, right? It's sort of like not listening to the science and then not implementing policies that you need, and not paying adequate attention to these huge health disparities that we have. And, and so I think if we can, sort of take something out of COVID in terms of like learning from it and kind of preparing for this next crisis. And I also like what you said, and it relates to what Alyssa said about how, you guys have been doing so much with renewable energy, and Alyssa, you have other projects. I think there are many ways that we can sort of all be, calling our state senators and reps and getting involved in these activities and really, ultimately making a real difference. So again, I also feel bad about these doom and gloom evenings as well, but I think the point is that there are things that we can do to make it less gloomy.
Caren, Jim, Vernon, Alyssa, thank you all so much for just a really information-packed. There has been, it's pretty sobering times to live in, but there are reasons. Information is power, and it's by sharing this information with each other that we can start to take care of each other and set this path forward. I wonder if anyone, Alyssa, I'd hand it to you, and then I ask each of you if you have any final words that you'd like to kind of let us, kind of end the evening with as we go out. So Alyssa, why don't we pass it to you, and then we can go around.
Absolutely. I'm so honored that so many people took so much time out of their evening today to come learn about climate change. It is not a topic that most people want to know much about or really consider, but I think our community is going to be better for it. And so I also want to thank Dr. Solomon and Dr. Recht and Reverend Walker for being here and taking the time out of their evenings. And I think I want to reiterate, please get in touch with me if you have interest in getting involved in this group and with more climate change policy in Quincy. And I'm hopeful. I'm an optimist, but I'm hopeful that we can really make an impact in this community in New England as a whole. So thank you again for all being here.
Thanks. Caren, is it all right if I say thank you on behalf of our Health Professionals Climate Action Group?
That would be great. Yes.
Yeah, and just I'm so impressed with the welcome that we got, and with Clayton and Alyssa, really your deep knowledge of these issues. Faye, thank you so much for kind of cluing us in on some of the achievements, many of them that Quincy's already should be proud of. One of the things we're trying to do as a health professionals climate action group, and you can check us out at climatecodblue.org, is to find a balance so that we can provide education, health education to communities that helps people understand the links to climate change and helps people mobilize to achieve health co-benefits from attacking climate change. We're trying to balance that with our need to learn from the communities that we work in. And we're very interested in learning as much as possible about the excellent work that folks like you guys in Quincy are doing. So keep us in mind, reach out to us. We'd love to develop relationships with you.
Jim, you said it beautifully. So I just echo it. And I again want to just thank all you guys and those of you who have been listening to all this. Thank you.
I echo the same sentiments. Thank you all for taking some time out of your busy day to be here tonight. If you do like to reach me, I did put my email. And if you would like to further talk about how we could potentially develop a crew team in Quincy, we'd love to have that conversation. And really just elated that we've all had the opportunity to come and exchange information. So I'm really just, as I like to say, peacock proud. I'm peacock proud and eagle happy. So anyway.
Well, knowledge is power, and I feel we should all be more powerful tonight. And in these days, that's what we need. How do we consolidate?
Amen.
How do we share our power and keep moving forward together? So thank you, everybody, for coming out tonight. Fore, give us your time.
Thanks.
If you would like contact information for anyone or help getting in touch, I'm very easy to find at the library. I'm ccheever@ocln.org. I'm happy to help provide connections with everybody here. So please reach out to me if there's anything else we can do to help. And I look forward to seeing you all again soon as we continue to figure our way together.
Great.
Have a good night. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.